All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live stream. Today, I have the good fortune of having two of my buddies from work join us on this call. We have Jeff and Brandon. Brandon, we'll start with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. 10 p.m. here, but we're feeling good.
Amazing. Amazing. And Jeff, how about you? You're in New Zealand.
I'm on the other side of the world, so it's already tomorrow.
I love it.
Living in the
Oh,
future.
Living in
absolutely.
the
So yeah, we
future.
are absolutely. So we don't know what time to claim it is. So we just kind of say whatever time it is, welcome. And of course, welcome to everybody who's joining this live as well. Again, as we always tell you, we do love to have people, audience members, ask questions, but most of all, we love to have you all join us on Discord or join us on LinkedIn or add comments to YouTube or wherever you can find this video or wherever you can find us. Please join us. You'll see the link to our Discord community here, and you can join us there and we can continue the conversation. The topic for today, of course, is one that we've talked about a little bit before as well, and that's about benchmarks. And I guess you could say it's a topic that's near and dear all of us because we're putting a lot of time into this. Obviously from my side, the engineering of it, Jeff connecting it to the customers that we talk to all the time, and of course Brandon working from the other side, which is about being able to market the story and be able to tell the narrative of why what we're building is so important. And from all three vantage points, I think the piece that we feel is the most deserving of our attention right now is to be able to build a formidable benchmark. Thoughts, comments from both of you as we introduce the topic?
Yeah, with a benchmark, I think one of the things that gets really exciting about a benchmark is not just about trying to understand how different competitors are performing and how our models and our agents are working, but also it's a challenge for us to think about how do we really have the use cases nailed down, right? Are we really measuring the right things? It's not just did it do the job, it's did it do the job well?
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff?
Yeah, and as I'm going through this process as a team and then reaching out to some of the people in the field, it's very clear that there's a desire for sales and SEs and such talking to customers to be able to show DevRev can do this, or customers are asking, can an agent do this? So the benchmarks give us a way to validate the tasks. Do we have the coverage, as Brandon said, but also just help people understand what's possible. And I think we're embarking on that process right now, and it's very different from benchmarking LLMs or coding agents and things like that. Very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you brought it up. It's a very different from benchmarking LLMs. We'll talk a little more about what type of LLM benchmarks exist today. They're usually some sort of an index fund of different benchmarks that already exist, right? So they'll take a few different things, humanities last exam and this, that, and the other, and they'll put it all together and say, you know what, that's your overall score, and we believe in those scores. But the question is, what about agents and what about agency? How do you evaluate agency? And we've thought about this problem quite a bit, and I think we're going to continue to. But if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen a little bit about to talk more about this. So I'm going to kind of go behind the kimono a little bit here, and I'm going to show something that we wrote a while back, actually. And you can see that this, last time I edited this was, gosh, a month and a half ago. So it's not a new paper, if you will, but I wrote this internally and I shared it with both of you. And I wanted to start there. You guys remember this, right?
Of course, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I wrote this and I said, you know what? We're going to have to introduce leaderboards. And what we don't want to do is create a benchmark for every job imaginable, every use case, every persona, every department, because that's just how omnipresent these agents are going to be. They're going to be everywhere. And the way to define and distinguish agents is not going to be based on departments or job taxonomy, software engineer, senior software engineer, project manager, technical program manager. That's a dime a dozen. I think it's going to be very difficult for us to do that. What I prefer and what I kind of introduced in this paper was this concept of having L1 to L4. Starting with L1. And the idea was there's level 1 autonomy, there's level 2 autonomy, level 3 autonomy, and level 4 autonomy. And the idea is, well, level 1 is about access to information, retrieval of information, and synthesis. of information. And if you can do that, if you can synthesize information that's not coming from a single source of data, but you have to amalgamate, you have to retrieve and access, and most importantly, be able to create a narration that makes sense and is distinguished in a way that satisfies the needs of the person who is accessing that information. Much like, let's just say certain responsibilities that we probably have ourselves would look. We would call those tasks L1 tasks. And of course, you would have greater and greater autonomy as you went to L2, L3, and L4. So we kind of came up with these framing, and we said, what does L1, L2, L3, L4 mean, right? So, like I write here, the higher the number, the more advanced the capability, without tying it to a specific department or use case. So the idea here is L1 is maybe just access, synthesis, retrieval, plus. And then of course you got level 2 that requires some level of not just data retrieval, but also, let's say, being able to select the right actions to take. And then of course, greater levels of reasoning on top of that, and greater levels of delegation would be what you would call maybe L3. And then of course, L4 means that you're able to do end-to-end task management, and you're able to do longer horizon task management as well, which is, obviously quite a bit more autonomous than the other levels. So that's kind of the idea that we came up with. And we said, let's go create an L1 benchmark, an L2 benchmark, based on not just department labels, but based on this framework of autonomy to say, how well can we do on a certain level of autonomous task? And, sort of make that be something that that's cross-cutting across different departments. So I know you've seen this, you've read this with me, and the idea came up because 40 years ago, we needed benchmarks for databases, relational databases, and not to try to recreate something from 40 years ago, but TPC benchmarks, they were a big deal. They changed the world in terms of how we saw what good performance looks like, what good capabilities look like in the database side, and there were clear winners and losers. Before that, everybody was industry leading, and we're seeing a little bit of that here today as well. So. Jeff, we'll start with you. Like, what were your thoughts when you read this and you heard L1 to L4? Because I'm sure our audience members have never heard this either.
My first instinct was it's finally going to give us kind of a language that's consistent regardless of the person's role to talk about, I'm going to do some ticket lookups. Am I going to look them up in Jira? Or am I going to look them up in Zendesk and return them? Is it for an engineer? Is it for a support person? But we can talk about the task at a similar level. And that gave us a common language to start organizing and thinking about the tasks as we design them, as we test them, and things like that, as opposed to getting lost, honestly, in the weeds of what would an engineer do, and then you can't put them in buckets anymore because they intermingle too much. So having this taxonomy, these levels, are very similar to a junior member of a team or a frontline first response support person, and that mental image helps us all understand and articulate these things and describe them to other people. And that was my first instinct when I saw this.
And it's something that we're starting to see too, some of the analyst community glom onto a little bit, right? Where you start with maybe even below an L1 is an L0, and that might be a chatbot, something that people are used to seeing that they might have called an agent back in the day. But as you get more and more advanced, you start to worry about, well, how do multiple agents orchestrate and work together? And then what is that eventually getting to, the future of autonomous business, which I think we're a little far from. But as you see that there's a clear progression of, as this technology gets better and stronger and faster, it's going to start to enable more and more complex decisions.
Yeah. And we've talked about these invisible boundaries between departments, right? Department select their own SaaS tools, and they have their own job titles, and they have their own terminology and taxonomy. And eventually what happens is, if you were to show all these different tasks to an agent, the agent might say, you know what, I sort of need the same skills, maybe access to different data, but I need the same type of tools, skills, or maybe reasoning capabilities to perform various tasks. Now, maybe for a human, they would have had to go to a different discipline or a different school or college to perform these different professional tasks. But for an agent, that can actually train itself programmatically and have access to information that it can actually go through very quickly, those same types of boundaries don't need to exist, right? So if we were to shift gears a little, we could come back to the L1 to L4 idea, but I know, Brandon, you've talked about this a little bit with me, and you even noted down some, shall we say, jobs to be done without necessarily trying to maintain these false boundaries. So perhaps you can kind of share what you had in mind there, because it only makes sense if we actually see what these jobs could look like, what these task responsibilities would look like, and start to believe that, yeah, these are all sort of at the same level of autonomy, and yet they don't belong to any one department.
Right. Yeah. And Jeff already kind of hinted at it. If you think of these as different, almost organizational levels, not layers, but one of the things that we realized really quickly as we started to do measurement and benchmarking here is that we're kind of missing the human layer of what are these tasks, right? What are they for? We started measuring a lot of this stuff from the inside out, right? Very technical things like latency and answer quality. And those are good. But what you miss is what is the benefit of those things, right? It was a little unclear how we would communicate that in marketing or to customers, or even our own innovation pipeline of like, what are these things for? We really lacked the so what of some of these levels. Yeah. So my background is in consumer research, right? So I've always been obsessed about like, what brands do people like? What do they think about them? How do they use the products they use? Why do they use the products they use? And the language of that research is attitude, emotion, and motivation, right? Yep. And these are things you can't really guess from behavioral data and signals. You can do some predictive stuff here, but it's just easier to ask people, well, what did you think about it? What were you trying to do? Did you do it? Did it frustrate you? Did it make you happy? So if you think about agents through those lenses, you stop worrying about things like latency and you start worrying about things like trust, right? Do I trust this answer? Do I think it's going to is it making me better at the job that I do? Not just, is it, half a second faster than something else?
So yeah, really, there's sort of an authenticity gap, right, that we're trying to fill as well, right? Because I sometimes think about it and I say, if there's a benchmark out there that where the person is asking a specific question and the information they provide in one single turn, if you will, is complete, and the response they get in a single turn is complete, that's not, I mean, honestly speaking, that never happens. I mean, maybe I'm a little short on words sometimes, but I need to ask the same question a few different ways. Sometimes, a conversation with me might go 5, 6, 7 different turns before I'm completely satisfied with whatever the exchange was meant to uncover. And a real benchmark that's authentic would have to reflect that, right? It can't just be a single turn and make me pretend like that's how it goes. It never goes that way with humans. So
Ahmed,
what did you come up with?
Ahmed, when you were saying that, I was wondering if you were talking about AI agents or if you were talking about human communication, because actually they're very, very similar.
Agreed. Totally.
And that's why that human layer is important, because what agents are trying to do, right, is what they need. They are all about context and choices. They're probabilistic choices, but they need a bunch of context from the data, from the chat itself, and from the business, right, in order to make those choices. But that doesn't really tell us if the agent is doing a good job. It just tells us if the agents did the job. Yep. So, I think back, I had done this research with a client who has a big writing portfolio, right? They sell pens. And the question that they were worried about, digital transformation and what's the future of a pen. And, we use this language of attitude and emotion and a motivation to try to understand, because you think, well, what are the jobs to be done around pens? Well, you write something down and that's it, right? Like, no, actually, there's a lot of emotional benefits that you get, right? When you write, when you take notes and you listen and you write, you actually retain more information. So that's a different job than if I'm trying to express myself and I just want to like journal, right? There's a reason why tech companies still have whiteboards. Right? Yep. And so they can explore ideas and change things around and do it in a way that makes sense. So if you start to think about the job itself a little bit differently and with a little bit more of this fuzzy stuff, you get really much more richer and interesting territories to explore. And that's what we're really trying to do as we think about the different jobs that we're asking our agents to do and how we evaluate them.
Yeah. And, I don't know if you have any examples of jobs, some descriptions that you could share with us, but if you have something that you could pull up, what I was added is that, I think the the benchmarks, there's going to come a time when there's benchmarks are going to be a dime a dozen. And again, like everything, taste matters. And so being able to bring the type of reflection and thought that you just shared with us, and having that manifest in the benchmark, that's how we're going to differentiate between a benchmark that people can resonate with, and say, you know what, that reflects accurately and authentically what we are trying to achieve, and one that's maybe a little bit more formulaic. And there's going to be plenty of those. I mean, you can use AI to build a benchmark. Believe me, I can assure you that. We've tried and it doesn't work.
I think you've shared that chat history.
Exactly. I think we've done it a few times now. Can you give me a few examples of some tasks, so on and so forth, jobs to be done?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, we'll bring this up. I think where it starts is the persona, right? So we know our use cases from the stuff that, from the product and where we focus.
Yeah.
But on top of that, we've got some personas that we think about. Well, who is the person? Who is there's different types of users, but there's also different managers have different roles and needs as well.
Yeah.
So let me just share this. Oh, great. Perfect. Yep. So when you think about the personas, we started with that, right? So for the different use cases that we have, a champion or somebody who's actually going to be the advocate for our product might have different needs. So we start with understanding, like, who are they at a job level, and then what are they trying to solve? What are the hidden motivations and benefits and attitudes that they have, and how do we keep that moving? And how do we explore that so that we get better results in the benchmarks, right? What do they care about? How do they build consensus internally? Right? So if we start to use these as one dimension of the benchmark, that gets us, and then we know our use cases, so we can layer it against that. You start to get these jobs of what are they achieving and why, right? Are they trying to identify what customers are at risk of churning this quarter?
And do you mind just making it slightly bigger with like a command plus and so on?
Let's see. How's
that
look?
Okay. That looks way better.
Are they trying to identify customers that are at risk of churn? Are they trying to just summarize health metrics across a couple of different accounts and get an overarching view of their work? Or are they trying to forecast, right? If you start to think about what would happen, what would be the need state around that moment, right? So if I know I've got to do a forecast, well, I've probably got a meeting that's coming up. I probably got a deadline. I probably need context from other people. This might be a thing that I'm a little insecure about, right? Oh, maybe I'm not a data person, and forecasts is a kind of a scary word, right?
Yeah.
So if you start to layer that stuff into the job, then you might change the answer or the actions that the agent takes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and just to overlay the L1 to L4 taxonomy on top of this, if we were to just take one of these things and say forecast upcoming customer escalations, that's probably an L2 or even L3 type of task, right? Because getting, customer escalations might be an L1 task. Being able to see which ones are, due because of some ETAs or target close dates, that could be an L2 type task, because you're synthesizing information plus doing some reasoning. But the forecast, I mean, unless you have a very well-defined skill to do forecasting, which could then be an L2 type task, could well be an L3 thing, because you have to sort of define how you would actually forecast, and then, take that intuition and apply it on top of a complex set of information. I think you could say that that's sort of a multi-domain, interdisciplinary type of action, which, from my vantage point, maybe an L2/L3 type of thing. Thoughts on that?
You could push it further, right? An L4, your forecasts have got to be consistent in the methodology over time, right?
Yeah.
Or across departments, right? So now you're talking orchestration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting when you start looking at, we're talking ultimately about benchmarking these things. How do you get even agreement on an L3 or an L4 task on what good looks like? Can you get even 3 human beings who are professionals in the field to agree to that? So defining these things, what the outcomes look like, and again, keeping this outside in. If it's really, what are the 3 professionals who would agree to this? That's not your computer science people in the background asking an LLM. So there's going to be a fair amount of human curation and other things involved as we go up the stack. And some of these are move the needle business type of tasks. And I think creating them, benchmarking them, judging them is going to be quite a journey. But I think it will have a big impact on how customers are embracing, using, and evaluating agents.
Yeah, and we're seeing this in the market right now. There's a lot of companies. We don't have to name any companies, but there's plenty of companies that are not only approaching this problem with mechanics and machinery, but they're also coming at it with experts and task labels and knowledge workers and laborers, and just all different interdisciplinary talent that's able to either review or refine or train or critique. And I think you're seeing that this entire pipeline requires much more than just software, right? It requires some hard skills, some soft skills, a mix of everything. And so we're excited about partnering with people who have these expertise, or even institutions that have this talent at their disposal, and to sort of apply it to this problem of building this benchmark. So I'm quite excited about that. Jeff, just shifting gears a little. I know. And by the way, folks, I'll just remind you again, Discord, you can meet us, you can join us, you can ask questions. And again, very grateful for your questions and very grateful for your partnership here. We are looking for others to participate in telling us how they feel about these jobs to be done. What you're seeing on the screen, this is not a done deal. We will need more and more feedback from the community to make this good. And eventually, hopefully, it becomes community driven. So we'll talk more about that maybe in a different live stream, but you see where this is headed, right? Jeff, just to switch gears a little, talk about like building some integrity with the audience. Like, how do we actually make this so that not only is it authentic, not only is it thoughtful, but we can also sort of talk about why things are hard, what makes it special, what the difference between an okay response and an amazing response would be in terms of, what we had to go through a combined data set to get this answer. We had to be able to read not just a PDF, but also read a markdown file, or maybe read a source code file to parse out this response. Like, how do you take that information and actually have a conversation with whoever is looking at these leaderboards or these benchmark ratings, to give them an indication of what was difficult, what it meant, what it took to actually be able to accomplish some of these tasks?
Yeah, I think the area that I've been trying to focus on and help bridge, if you will, between what Brandon has up here, which is very conversational, very the end user, I need to get this job done, and the behind the scenes, I've got a task, and how do I describe the task? And some of these tasks could be described with some of these phrases. So a single task could have multiple phrases attached to it. So how do you tag them? How do you find them? How do you describe them? And the answer to that, and I'll share my screen here in a moment, is a lexicon. So the idea that we have to have a vocabulary specific to this field, this area. It's like an ontology when we look at connecting different data sources and what does it mean in one area or another, but this is around the knowledge and the data itself. Think of a lexicon as hashtags for the task, but it's very systematic. It's very multidimensional, and as best as we can do it, it's complete. So I said bridging between kind of this very programmatic and this very human conversational. If I'm looking for a task and we've named the tasks, blah, 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 number this or that, nobody's going to know what it means. Nobody's going to be able to find it. It's very meaningful to the computer because it's just a database lookup. But in a conversational sense, find at-risk customers from ticket patterns, kind of going back to the example Brandon just had up there first on the list. But I find tasks that have tags that help me achieve that find at-risk customers from ticket patterns. So it would have to include tickets. It would have to have some sort of pattern analysis, and it would have to have something about customer retention. So in order to achieve that, we start with the autonomy levels. So every task can be tagged with an autonomy level. And then the capabilities. What does the task do? Is it pattern recognition, decision-making? Is it trying to understand frustration and tone? Is it trying to generate policy and procedures if we start going to that level 3 and level 4?
Right.
You can see increasing complexity and difficulty here. And roles, even though we talked about personas and that level 1, 2, 3, 4 isn't tied to specific users or departments, I still, from the outside, walk up to it and go, well, I'm in customer support. I want to see examples that are relevant to customer support, or I'm on an AE or an SE, and I want to show such a customer those things. Then this is a world of artifacts. I've got tickets, I've got knowledge base articles, I've got opportunities in a CRM. So what is the task working with is an important tag, because unlike a lot of the straight up sort of deterministic, I call them in a way, benchmarks, write this code, solve this problem, play this game, you can determine what the output is, and there isn't a whole lot of inputs involved in it. So what it works with is very important, and creating that universe of artifacts for it's important. And then, for lack of a better word, because we have tasks and everything else, workflows. So how is it used? Am I using it for troubleshooting? Am I using it to qualify deals, etc.? Then the domain. So this may be different than the actual role that we had earlier. Is this related to customer support? Is it related to finance? Is it related to sales, etc.? But specific things within that, in those areas. Again, extending this idea of another dimension, what are the business outcomes? Because these are tasks for businesses to use agents to do a job. So saying that I'm doing this to find churn and reduce churn is a very, very important tag on a task. Then complexity, I mean, am I dealing with multiple artifacts? Am I trying to do something in real time? Am I synthesizing things across multiple systems, etc.? And then ultimately, one of the tags is these persona groups. Am I trying to represent the thought of a champion, influencer, gatekeeper? So what you do then is you've got a query, I say, analyze ticket patterns to create an international expansion playbook. But the tags that can lead to that are here, and you can semantically connect those things. So I'm just going to pull up very, very briefly, just so people can have an idea of what this looks like in practice. This is the actual lexicon in practice. I've got a tag. Here's a description of it. It's related to L1, and here's some aliases that aid with the lookup. So by having this inside of the task, or connected as metadata to the task, we start to be able to search for tasks that then answer the questions or the job to be done that was on Brandon's slide.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, these tags are not mutually exclusive. And in fact, they're actually hierarchical in a way.
Yes. Because it's 9 dimensions, remember? So there will be some hierarchy, but there will also be multiple dimensions along all those things that I just previously showed here that result in tags on a specific task.
And of course, a solid benchmark, whether it's the L1 benchmark or the L2 benchmark, would have some distribution of tags across all these dimensions to be able to be fair. And like even the example that you gave, what would be really interesting is to say, hey, look, let's have a benchmark task that demonstrates that we are able to handle different languages, right? How do you actually even exhibit that behavior? How do you demonstrate that that's there? Like, I would say that a modern benchmark would be rather incomplete if we actually did not incorporate some level of localization, internationalization. Or another example is, more about just how sophisticated is the capability. For example, you may be able to answer a question from a PDF document, but are you able to also, as a reference, show that you understood that there was a figure or a chart in the PDF, and that is indeed related to the finding that you were able to share by doing, maybe a RAG ++ type of operation, which would be more of an L1. But if you're able to then incorporate the figure into your response, which may have been on the second page or the third page, that's even more fascinating, right? That for me is an even better answer. So it's not just about having a correct answer, but it's what does it take to actually get full credit, if you will, in today's world. Right. Which is not an easy thing to think about, and which is why we're trying to bring more and more expertise into the fold. Thanks for going through that.
And that's why it gets harder when you start to think about different industry verticals, right? Not just different use cases and personas, but the finance versions are going to be really different than the retail ones, right? Even if the tasks themselves might be the underlying tasks might be very similar, the way that it's communicated might be super different.
Yeah. I think we're going to be having conversations around this topic for the next few months. And honestly, what I'd love to do is have folks from outside of DevRev's 4 walls join us, as we have in the past. Obviously, we've had people from Terminal Bench join us because we are using that technology as sort of the underlying layer. And I think we want to start talking about how we not only define the benchmark, but what happens when you actually run the benchmarks against DevRev, and what have we found, and what have we fixed, what have we improved. I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. Then, of course, as people can imagine, if you create a benchmark, it's not just to test one singular product, right? I mean, we're not just building it to test our own product, although most test fleets, most test frameworks, ironically, are built that way, to only test the technology that's built within the four walls of your own enterprise. But we don't want to do that here, right? Because we want to take this and make this more publicly facing, more universally available, and something that others can communicate. So, something that's more community oriented. And at that point, it doesn't have to be just, targeting DevRev. It could be targeting all manners of agents that are out there that believe they can do a good job with, different types of autonomy and agency.
That might be why every agent is industry leading, right, Ahmed? Because if there's only one player in the race, then you always win.
Absolutely. It's a great way to, always get the first prize, right? So we've seen a lot of that. We walk around some of these expo halls and you see a lot of industry leading AI, and it's comical, but it's also a little, I think it's a little, makes me a little nervous. Yeah. It's a little, it's disingenuous. And I think we just need to bring a little bit more authenticity to this game. Last thoughts, Jeff, from your end.
I think as we go on this journey, us and we're asking for people from the outside, there's going to be some very serious aha moments as we go along. I know, just even trying to define tasks and testing in these last few months, getting an L1 or an L2 task that is judgeable is far more difficult than I would have ever expected. So we really do need the participation of a lot more brains, a lot more points of view on this to end up with a very rich, useful set of tasks and a useful way of judging and benchmarking those.
Yeah. Brandon?
Well, the thing that keeps me up is right now, a lot of the tasks are about automating or accelerating processes that exist today. They're not about future of work that doesn't happen yet, right? So what does it mean so it's one thing for an agent to automate a process that I'm already doing, and that's good. That's not really getting the full value, right? We work a little bit differently at DevRev because we're built with it. But I think about places I've been before where, you've got kind of analog work streams. You might add AI to accelerate it, but what does it really mean when agents are truly integrated and it looks different? Then the tasks also have to look different, even if they're still measuring the same L1, 2, 3, 4.
Brandon, I wonder if there's an analogy there to the often quoted Einstein doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Unless we come up with new ways of doing things thanks to these tools, we're probably going to end up in the same boat, just get there faster.
Well, how do we measure the experimentation that's happening elsewhere, right? We work with our customers. That's great. But that's why, so bring your ideas, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Call to action for everybody here is to bring your ideas and join us on Discord, and let's build a community around this. More on that in a subsequent live stream. We went over by a couple minutes. Apologies, and thanks to everybody who stuck around to hear this out. And for me, this is just another half hour spent with two people that I could talk to for hours. So I think for those of you who have also seen our computer program videos, that we like to build out in the open. We're not trying to hide anything. We want to make this an affair where everybody sees what it looks like to build a company that's really trying to redefine the future of work. And, that's what this is all about. So appreciate everybody's participation. Jeff, Brandon, appreciate you guys joining me here. And we'll do it again soon.
Love it.
Thank you.
Hope to hear from everybody. Thanks.
See you later. Bye.